Chapter 20. When the narrator returns to Harlem, the area seems unfamiliar. The narrator encounters two familiar men. When he calls them brother, the men get offended, saying that he is no brother of theirs. The narrator leaves the bar, soon arriving at the district offices. Looking for Brother Tarp, Tarp's bed and possessions have disappeared. The narrator realizes that now he is all alone. He orders the remaining members of the district to form teams in search for Clifton. While looking over the district records, the narrator notices that members in Harlem has fallen as Brotherhood began to focus on national and international issues, as opposed to local politics. The narrator waits to be called to normal strategy meetings, but no word arrives. Aware that something is up, the narrator attempts to call headquarters to get in touch with someone. Convinced that he has been excluded from the meeting, the narrator heads downtown to headquarters. When he arrives, he finds the meeting is indeed in session, and that there are strict orders that the meeting remain undisturbed. Angry at being left out of the discussion-making process, the narrator discusses the Brotherhood can contact him when they're ready. The narrator takes a walk in his new shoes. On 43rd Street, the narrator sees a group of people gathered. The narrator recognizes a boy from a friend of Clifton's, standing just outside the crowd. The boy is watching a policeman on the other side of the block, who seems to be approaching the crowd. The narrator addresses the boy, but the boy turns and whistles back towards the crowd. The narrator discovers that the barker is in fact Todd Clifton. The narrator comes to break up the show. Clifton picks up the Samboy dolls and tries to lead the crowd around the corner in order to continue the show. Both Clifton and his audience quickly disappear. Leaving the narrator behind, he sees one of the Samboy dolls lying on the ground and picks it up. He then recalls Clifton's words about the need to fall outside of history. The narrator keeps the Samboy doll in his pocket. In the park, he sees two men, Clifton and the police officer. Then the officer pushes him, and Clifton punches the officer and falls to the ground. The officer pulls out his gun and shoots Clifton. The narrator tries to approach Clifton, but is waved off by a police officer. The officer replies to Clifton that Clifton is dead. The narrator wanders into the subway, shocked by Clifton's death. He thinks again of Clifton's words about falling out of history and notes that only certain men get to record history. For the first time, the narrator begins to have doubts about the Brotherhood and its scientific certainty. But the narrator exits the subway, weak with grief. He sees a group of boys running out of a candy shop with stolen goods. The scene makes the narrator realize that little has changed, and that with love of the Brotherhood's ideals allow him to ignore a lack of real progress in Harlem. First Clifton and now Tarp have disappeared for a Harlem office. The narrator's two strongest allies, leaving the narrator isolated in Harlem office. The narrator cannot understand why the Brotherhood would choose to shift its focus at the height of the group's popularity in Harlem. The narrator is being iced out of the Brotherhood strategy meeting, implying that the action is being taken against him. Feeling disillusioned with the organization that has ruined his efforts in Harlem, the narrator decides to let the committee do what it will, a decision with potentially dangerous consequences. The narrator is shocked by the image of the racist dolls and Clifton who is discovered to be the Parker, for the narrator. Clifton's decision to drop out of the Brotherhood to sell some Bowie dolls feels like a cruel and senseless rejection. Though Clifton's shift seems to suggest that he himself come to a conclusion that he had become a kind of Bowie dancing for a brotherhood, and in his despair, he has chosen to embrace that fact. Clifton's decision to sell some Bowie dolls is a denial of the Brotherhood's vision of progress, suggesting that nothing really changes and that the Brotherhood is no different than the other elite or powerful. As Clifton is shot, his own protest of the Brotherhood's vision of progress is mirrored in his death. The death of Clifton's reminds the narrator that the ideology itself of the Brotherhood is flawed, and that the history is not a perfect machine. The narrator uses the Bowie doll as a grotesque image of a black performer who superfluously entertains for whites. The doll exaggerated movements contour images of black rhythm and sensuality.